Most people want to live a long life. That's hardly surprising. Very few people wake up hoping their life will be shorter. But here's something interesting. When people talk about longevity, they often focus on things that are difficult: complicated diets, expensive supplements, exhausting exercise programs, the latest health trends, the newest miracle compounds, the secret habits of centurions. Yet one of the most powerful factors associated with longevity may be something most of us do every single day: sleep, or perhaps more accurately, getting enough of it. Because while we spend roughly a third of our lives sleeping, many people treat sleep as though it's optional, something that can be sacrificed, something that can be postponed, something that can be squeezed between work, family commitments, social media, television, and everything else competing for our attention. I know I've certainly done that at different points in my life. Many of us have. The problem is that the human body doesn't seem particularly interested in our schedules. It is still requires sleep. And when it doesn't get enough, consequences begin to appear. Not always immediately, not always dramatically, but gradually, and sometimes in ways we don't even notice. In this video, I want to explore these simple questions. Can sleep help you live longer? What does the research tell us about sleep duration and mortality? Why do researchers often recommend 7 to 9 hours of sleep? And what is the strange relationship scientists keep finding between both too little sleep and too much sleep? I'm Leon Figures, and I'd like to thank you for taking time to watch this video. If you enjoy the content, find it useful, or think it may help somebody else, consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it with someone who may benefit from it. Can sleep help us live longer? Can too little sleep increase our risk of dying earlier? Can too much sleep also be associated with poorer health outcomes? And could something we do every night be one of the most important investments we can make in our future health? Let's look at the evidence. One of the most influential pieces of research on the subject was published in the journal Sleep. Researchers conducted a meta-analysis examining sleep duration and mortality. The study was led by Professor Francesco Cappuccio and colleagues, published in 2010. The researchers combined data from 16 separate studies involving more than 1.3 million participants and over 100,000 recorded deaths. That makes it one of the largest investigations ever conducted into sleep duration and longevity. Now that sounds technical, but the idea is quite simple. Instead of looking at one study, researchers combined data from multiple studies involving millions of participants. The goal was to identify patterns that might not be obvious when looking at smaller groups. And what they found was fascinating. Sleep duration appeared to follow what researchers called a U-shaped curve. Now don't worry about the terminology. The concept is straightforward. Imagine drawing the letter U. People in the middle of the U appear to have the lowest risk of death. As sleep duration moved away from the middle point, the risk began increasing. On the one side of the curve, we have people sleeping too little. On the other side of the curve, we have people sleeping longer than average. Both groups appear to experience higher mortality rates compared to people sleeping somewhere in the middle. That's important because many people assume the relationship is simply less sleep equals worse health and more sleep equals better health. The research suggests that the relationship is more complicated than that. Researchers repeatedly found that sleeping around 7 to 9 hours per night was associated with the lowest risk of mortality for most adults. In the Cappuccio analysis, short sleep was generally defined as 6 hours or less per night, while long sleep was generally defined as 9 hours or more. Compared with people sleeping around 7 to 8 hours, short sleepers experience a significant increased risk of death from all causes. Specifically, people sleeping 6 hours or less experience approximately 12% higher risk of death during the follow-up period. Those sleeping 9 hours or more experience approximately 30% higher risk. Researchers were careful to point out that these findings demonstrate association rather than causation, but the pattern was consistent enough to attract significant scientific attention. Again, this does not prove that sleeping longer causes earlier death. It simply demonstrates a remarkably consistent relationship that researchers continue to observe across large populations. Now, before we go any further, it's important to understand what these studies do and do not tell us. They do not prove that sleeping exactly 8 hours guarantees a longer life. The human beings are far more complex for that. What they show are associations, patterns, relationships that repeatedly appear across large populations, and when research keeps finding the same pattern in different countries, different age groups, different populations, we start paying attention. Now, let's talk about short sleep first, because this is where many people find themselves. Modern life isn't exactly designed to encourage good sleep. Late night scrolling, streaming services, shift work, stress, long working hours, children, financial worries, the list goes on. Many people regularly sleep 6 hours or less, sometimes less than that. And while the occasional short night probably isn't a disaster, chronic sleep deprivation appears to be a different story. Researchers have linked insufficient sleep with increased risk of obesity, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, increased risk of type 2 diabetes, higher blood pressure, poorer immune function, and impaired cognitive performance. When you think about it, that begins to make sense. Sleep isn't simply a period where the body switches off. Sleep is an active biological process. Hormones are regulated, memories are consolidated, tissues are repaired, the immune system carries out important work, the brain performs housekeeping tasks that scientists are still trying to fully understand. In 2017, researchers Matthew Walker and Bryce Mander published a review in the journal Nature Reviews Neuroscience, examining sleep and healthy aging. They describe sleep as one of the most important biological processes supporting brain health, memory consolidation, and long-term physiological recovery. One of the key messages from their review was simple. Sleep isn't lost time. Sleep is active maintenance, and without enough of it, many of the systems that support long-term health begin functioning less effectively. When sleep is repeatedly shortened, some of those processes may become compromised, and over years or decades, that may influence long-term health. Now let's move to the other side of the U-shaped curve, because this often surprises people. Why would longer sleep be associated with higher mortality? Surely, more sleep should be better. The answer is that researchers aren't entirely certain. One possibility is that longer sleep isn't necessarily causing poorer health. Instead, it may sometimes be a sign that underlying health issues already exist. Certain illnesses can increase fatigue. Some medical conditions may increase sleep duration. In that scenario, longer sleep becomes a marker rather than a cause. The important point is that researchers repeatedly observe the association, which is why both unusually short sleep and unusually long sleep often attract attention in research. Now let's talk about why 7 to 9 hours appear so frequently, because that range wasn't selected randomly. Researchers repeatedly find that most adults function best somewhere within it. Not because everybody's identical, some people naturally need slightly more and some naturally need slightly less, but for most adults, 7 to 9 hours appears to provide enough time for the body and brain to complete many of the restorative processes associated with healthy sleep. Sleep appears to be one of the ways we recharge the systems and keep us functioning. For me, I'm a middle-aged man, and as long as I can remember, I function just fine with about 6 hours of sleep. That's just how my body works. I've always been able to I've also never been able to just lie in. I wake up and I get up. No idea why, I just do. Girlfriends would ask, why you get up so early on a weekend? I'd explain, I wake up, so I got up, and I find things to do. One ex fan is fascinating. You do know, once you wake up, realize you don't need to be up. If you lie there, relax, with your eyes closed, you go back to sleep. It had never even occurred to me to try. So I did try, and she was right. But I can't say I felt any better. I didn't feel better rested. I didn't feel better recovered. I just felt as though I had spent unnecessary extra time in bed sleeping. Maybe it's because I really fight the urge to sleep. When I'm tired, I sleep. I pad my sleep into my regime. I know I need to be sleeping soon after midnight. I go to bed earlier if I must wake up earlier. On occasions when I know I'll be forced to operate with less sleep, I conserve energy throughout the day. I'll take a nap the following day to reclaim my missed sleep. That's me. 6 hours sleep for me is good. That doesn't mean 6 hours is optimal for everybody, or even for me. It simply means that's what has felt normal throughout most of my adult life. Of course, individual experiences don't always tell us what happens across entire populations. That's one reason long term studies are so valuable. In 2014, researchers analysed data from the Whitehall II Study, one of Britain's most influential health studies. The Whitehall II Study followed thousands of British civil servants for decades, examining how lifestyle factors influence long term health and mortality. The researchers looked at more than 9,000 men and women and examined both sleep duration and sleep quality. What they found was particularly interesting. Sleep duration alone mattered, but sleep quality mattered too. People who regularly experience disturbed sleep alongside usually short or unusually long sleep durations tended to have poorer long term outcomes than those sleeping with a moderate range and reporting better quality sleep. In other words, it wasn't simply about how many hours people spend in bed, the quality of their sleep appeared important as well. The researchers found further evidence that sleep duration and sleep disturbances may both play important roles in long term health outcomes, adding further support to the growing body of evidence suggesting that healthy sleep may play an important role in long term health and longevity. What's interesting is that the study researched a similar conclusion to many of the others we've discussed. Different researchers, different populations, different methods, yet the same general patterns keep appearing. Healthy sleep seems to matter. Now let's zoom out for a moment because longevity isn't usually determined by one thing. Instead, longevity tends to emerge from the combined effects of many different habits repeated over years because sleep is fundamental. Researchers continue finding links between sleep and cardiovascular health. One particularly interesting source of evidence comes from the UK Biobank, one of the largest health databases ever assembled. Researchers have followed hundreds of thousands of adults for years, examining how sleep habits relate to disease and mortality. Their findings have generally supported the idea that both insufficient sleep and excessive sleep are associated with poorer long term health outcomes, while moderate sleep durations tend to be associated with the lowest risk. Researchers have also observed links between poor sleep patterns and cardiovascular disease, metabolic disorders, and all cause mortality, sleep and metabolic health, sleep and immune function, sleep and cognitive performance, sleep and overall mortality. Different researchers, different populations, different methodologies, yet the same general message keeps appearing. Sleep matters. Now, here's something I find encouraging. Improving sleep doesn't require elite athletic ability. It doesn't require expensive equipment. It doesn't require extraordinary genetics. For many people, improvements begin with relatively simple changes. Going to bed slightly earlier, keeping a consistent schedule, reducing late night screen exposure, creating a darker sleep environment, giving sleep the same priority we often give diet and exercise. Small improvements repeated consistently over time. Now let's bring everything together. Large studies examining millions of people have found a consistent relationship between sleep duration and mortality. Researchers repeatedly observe a U-shaped curve. People sleeping too little often experience higher mortality risks. People sleeping significantly longer than average often experience higher mortality risks as well. The lowest risk consistently appears somewhere around 7 and 9 hours per night for most adults. That doesn't mean sleep is the only factor influencing longevity. Far from it, but it does suggest that sleep may be one of the foundations upon which long term health is built. Can sleep help you live longer? The evidence suggests it can. Can sleeping too little appear associated with increased mortality risk? The evidence suggests yes. Does sleeping significantly longer than average also appear associated with poorer outcomes? The evidence suggests yes. And does 7 to 9 hours appear to represent a sweet spot for most adults? Again, the evidence suggests yes. Sleep isn't glamorous. Sleep isn't exciting. Sleep doesn't come with flashy marketing campaigns, but according to a growing body of scientific evidence, sleep may be one of the most powerful health habits available to us because the goal isn't simply living longer. The goal is enjoying these healthy years, having the energy to experience them, the health to participate in them, and the capacity to live life fully. Sleep appears to be one of the simplest ways to support that goal, because sometimes the most powerful things we can do for our health aren't the most complicated. Sometimes they're the things we've been overlooking all along. You get one body, fuel it properly.